Hello and welcome to Dropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we're talking about The French Connection today, the 1971 action thriller by William Friedkin. We're doing a bunch of Friedkin films after we did Bug recently. I'd never seen this before. It won all the Oscars. It won Best Picture, Best Actor for Gene Hackman. It won Best Director for Friedkin, Best Film Editing, Best Adapted Screenplay for Ernest Tidyman. And it was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Roy Scheider, Best Cinematography, and Best Sound Mixing. This was a big awards movie, and it won the lot. What's your history with it? You must have you've seen this before, clearly.
I've seen it before. I mean, it's one of those films that I was too young to see when it came out in the cinema. I think it's almost like I date my film-going life to like 1976, 77, because, you know, that's when you turned 14 and you could go, watch films on your own. So I was too young to see it. And actually, it's one of those films that I never saw until, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years ago. I saw it, actually. And I saw French Connection 1 and French Connection 2.
Oh, right.
Which is also really good. And I suppose my response to it is, I think the first time I saw it because the chase sequence the chase scene is one of the most famous chase scenes of all time. And I was a bit unimpressed with that, actually.
Oh, right, okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I thought it was good. But, you know, we've seen a lot of chase scenes since. And, I didn't think it was so, extraordinary as people said. So I was much more observant watching it last night because I didn't go into it with any ideas in mind. So actually there were other things that I noticed, that sparked my interest more than the chase sequence. Though, well, I'm wondering whether to tell you this now or wait until I hear what you thought. Oh, wait, what did you think? Yeah.
I was surprised at how bored I was for a long time. Then in the last, I suppose it's after about the hour mark, is when that chase sequence happens and things start kicking up. And I started to get really into it. And I really liked the chase sequence. I thought it was really, really well. I knew it was iconic, and I think I might have seen clips of it before. I mean, the thing about the camera on the bonnet of the car, weaving between traffic, and you've got the elevated train line above. That's really iconic, and I'd seen bits and pieces of that before, but I'd never seen the thing entirely, and I thought it was great. And I love the accidents that he has in it, which I was reading that apparently they were genuine accidents. He's supposed to have these near misses, and they just kept fucking it up, but kept it in the film. And I thought, when do you actually see that? When do you see car crashes in films are these big deals? They're not here. In this, he sideswipes a car, turns around and keeps going. There's something kind of anarchic about it, and it kind of fits the character, I suppose. He's this character who will cause chaos in the end of getting the thing done. I sort of, I suppose, didn't really follow the plot for a long time. I mean, I was kind of, I don't know if it's full of holes or if it's not that interesting or whatever the reason was, but I was just kind of going, okay, so that the opening kind of salvo in France, where the guy's walking home with his French bread, and you know it's France because of that, and he gets shot on the stairs. You never find out who that guy is or why. It's just a thing that happens, right? There's a few things that seem to happen like that.
I didn't have any problem with that.
The two detectives, and particularly the Gene Hackman character, pursuing this case, is always kind of less about actually getting heroin off the streets. It's about this heroin deal that they're trying to stop. And it's always less about what's right, and it's more about just getting the bad guy and doing, because that's kind of what you do. I suppose in some respects, it has a similarity I was thinking about to the Melville films we were talking about. And I was kind of observing with Melville that these people do what they do because that's just who they are, and the legal purpose behind what they're doing is not so interesting. It's more about who they are inside. That seems to be the case with Gene Hackman.
I think Melville's films are like a million times superior to this.
Well, I'm not comparing them in terms of quality or anything like that. I'm just saying I think that's actually a similarity. There's some. It seems to go for a kind of existential.
Okay, well, I'm going to reveal what the quote that I didn't tell you. So I was looking through Wikipedia, and there was a quote there from Pauline Kael, who didn't like the film. You know, not because she didn't think it was not good. She thought, like, you know, it's a very good film. But she says, you know, but I don't like it because, you know, this is what we once feared movies would become. And I think it's true because, you know, I was thinking afterwards, so what is the film about? What is it telling you? What is it telling you about these people? And what is it telling you about this world? You know, what point of view is it conveying about, you know, humanity or whatever? And actually, the thing about film noirs or, you know, some of the best action films is that they do, you know, and sometimes they do it visually or they do it through the action or, you know, I think kind of, you know, Melville does it in all kinds of ways, right? Like in the way that he composes his frames, really. But I was trying to think about that in relation to this film. And actually, I liked so much about it. Like, you know, I loved Hackman. And we can talk about all this. I have a whole series of ideas on that, actually. But, you know, when I was thinking, what is the film about? Yeah, I actually kind of couldn't come up with an answer. You know, so it has, like, this terrific noir lighting. But it isn't really about a corrupt world. Yeah, it isn't a world in which power rules. It isn't... I'm trying to think of all, you know, it isn't about unleashed sexuality or, like, you know, or repressed sexuality. I mean, so many of the themes of, like, film noir, this film is not about them, right? And then you think, well, what is it about?
I suppose I would say I feel like it's about a kind of harshness and brutality in the world, as opposed to an injustice, which I think might be more where you go with kind of classic noir. There's something about New York in this that is harsh and brutal, and there's something in Hackman's character where he enjoys brutalizing minorities.
Yes,
kind of for the sheer fun of it. You know, you were talking
Yes.
about how Hackman, how Friedkin has this interest in kind of underworlds or the underbelly of cities, and you get that sense where when Hackman kind of has this interest in going into these underbellies and damaging them and kind of taking them over and imposing his will upon them because he can, and because these are kind of lawless places already, he can do what he wants.
Yes, him being handcuffed in bed
Yeah.
is like a really interesting connection to all of that.
Yeah. And you know, right at the end, when they're chasing the baddies into the sort of disused factory where the kind of shootout happens climactically, he shoots an FBI officer, and Scheider says, "Oh, this is Merkin," or whatever his name was, and he just goes on like Hackman doesn't care, you know, doesn't show any remorse,
Well,
just goes on, shoots someone else.
It is the guy who's been in the back seat bullying and making fun of him, like, you know, during the whole of the film. So I wouldn't shed a tear over him either.
Well, I'm not shedding a tear, but you know, he's shot an FBI guy. That's really not his job. You know?
Yes, no, it's true. I mean, but those are things that make the film more interesting in a way, not less, except that they aren't consistent and they aren't patterned, right? Like, I don't think the film is about that. Yeah, so the film is not about, you know, people like Gene Hackman who take the law in their own hands and are vigilantes the way that Eastwood's Dirty Harry was.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you could say that Dirty Harry is about that and about the glory of that. But this film isn't about that. I mean, it's almost like, you know, Popeye Doyle has contradictions. But actually, they're never worked through in a systemic way throughout the film that I can gather.
No, well, I suppose I think that it's about a tone of sort of meaninglessness. And I suppose you get, like, do you feel like you're supposed to like Doyle?
Yes.
Do you feel like you're supposed to like him?
Well, actually, so one of the things that I noticed, because I grew up with Gene Hackman being a very big star, like not one of the huge box office stars, you know, but he was always a star. And he was considered a kind of a star character actor. And there's lots of commentary about, how he was only a star character actor because he wasn't good looking enough to be a star. And actually, you see him here, and I thought he was very sexy, like really attractive. I think kind of, people's notions of what is attractive are very restrictive. They think only someone like Brad Pitt is attractive. In fact, some people might not think Brad Pitt is attractive at all, really. Either, the way that he moves, and the way that his body is very attractive, I think. And also, the way that he's dressed, and, kind of the thing about the hat, that was a look, right? So I think he's very sexy and he's very attractive. And I'm not at all surprised that he became a big star with this film. Yeah, this is the film that, he became known earlier, but this is the film that made him a star. Yeah. And it's completely understandable why that is. So I loved his performance in it.
But are you supposed to like the character of Doyle for what he does, the way he behaves? I get the impression that you are, but I didn't. Is that because the film's not made for me? Times have changed? I think you're supposed to delight in how he abuses people, takes control of situations, behaves erratically, that sort of thing. And ultimately, he's the cop with the hunches that turn out to be right.
Yeah. Well, I don't like it, but I also think that the film is very inconsistent about that. Right? So, he's a cop who is upholding the law, yet is breaking all of them. But the film doesn't underline it as a moment of heroism or, breaking the law to get justice done. It's not, the film doesn't deal with any of that. So that's why I think, that in many ways, the film maybe is not about that. I think maybe the film is about the car chase. Right?
Do you think the film is presenting him, I suppose, sort of non-judgmentally, or without that kind of direction as to how you should feel, in order to allow kind of a range of responses?
No, the film is based on real people. They're real people that Friedkin had dealings with, I believe. Right? So I think there's no question that you are meant to admire them and also bemoan. Yeah? So because the thing is, the film has that coda at the end where it says, well, this person didn't serve any jail time at all. That one got a suspended sentence. That one. It seems that the person who was most punished was the television star, who in the film seems to do the least. He agrees to take a car to France and he doesn't know what's in it or anything, so, and he's the one who gets the biggest jail sentence at the end. So I think that is a commentary, so I think you're meant to admire, but I don't. And then you're meant to bemoan, and then it seems to me kind of, the film is almost wanting, maybe it's a countercultural thing of the period, that, the law doesn't work. But then why are you meant to, to admire what Popeye Doyle does? You are meant to be with him.
Yeah, sure. I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and there are many things that make me uncomfortable. This is almost like a kind of a white supremacist film. Some of the scenes now play really badly, I think. Those scenes in the black clubs, right? Because also, they're not meant to indicate police brutality or to indicate how black people suffer under police brutality. They are meant to indicate a little kind of, the way that Doyle does business and gets things done. Yeah, that's, I think, what they're meant to indicate. But that sits very uncomfortably with me, at least now.
Yeah, and again, I think that's kind of it may be like a sign of the times. Like that's something that you're clearly supposed to. I think you're supposed to laugh at it. Actually, I think you're supposed to laugh with him.
To show a black club in which he asks people to empty their pockets, and every single person, has drugs in their pocket. Every single black person in that club has drugs in their pocket. Come on, right?
And I suppose I was kind of thinking, how did this play in 1971, right? That's really the difference. I think there's a huge difference between the way this would have played in a cinema in 1971 in New York, especially, you know, because it's so about New York. New York is so identifiable with this film. It's totally inseparable. And the thing is, now I'm watching it on a laptop in England in 2020. You know, it's not the same.
No, but I mean, we know that the film played incredibly well. It wasn't just like a hit. It was like a Godfather style hit. Yeah, it was like a sociological phenomenon type hit, right? So, you know, let's say if a hit now is a film that does $150 million, well, this would be the equivalent of an Avengers style, you know, $700 million type hit. Yeah, we can look up the statistics later, but I think it was like the number 1 or 2 film of its year. And, you know, if you look at the films at number 1 and 2, if you look at what it grossed, and then you look at the next film, it's like the next film probably grossed half of it. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge, enormous success. Have you found the figure?
The figure from Box Office Mojo says $51 million.
There you go. Yeah, it was one of those enormous, enormous hits. Yeah, It's one of those films that people saw several times. So I think, you know, to me, my understanding is that people, you know, audiences loved the film. It was a very popular film.
And this was an era as well when actually being one of the highest grossing films of the year was not incompatible with winning awards. You know, that didn't really happen for a long time. You know, so like that probably happened like in the 2000s that you really started to see, well, either you're an awards film or you're a high grossing film.
Yes.
Which is why I think they opened up the Best Picture nominations to 10 in the last few years, because they said, no, come on, get more of the popular films back in, please, that people have seen.
Yes.
Yes. You know, so this was, you know, hugely popular and hugely well regarded.
And actually, like, there's so much about the film that I love. I love the look of it. You know, it looks fantastic. And I think New York is like a whole character in the film, really. Well, to me, so the location is tied to a commentary or a feeling, right? So, you know, it's interesting that the villain is a Frenchman. Well, actually, you know, he is a very big star of the period, really well known in European art cinema. It's Fernando Reyes, Spanish actor, right, who did a lot of Buñuel's films and who was probably best known for Buñuel's films internationally. But he comes across as, like, you know, very suave and elegant and, you know, smart, actually. You know, it's very interesting to portray this drug baron in those ways, right? Like, you know, he's not out there selling drugs and poisoning people, you know. Yeah, he's, you know, he's an elegant, suave, working class man, yeah, because you're told at the beginning that he worked his way up through the docks, yeah, and obviously made his money through illegal means. So I think there's an interesting contrast there between Marseille, France, you know, and America, New York, right? And actually, everything that you see about Marseille is almost pretty, right? Like, you know, so yes, you have the narrow streets and the cobblestones, and actually, the way that the streets were reminded me a little bit of Madrid. Yeah, that it's amazing how recent, yeah, this new type of sidewalk and so on is, because you know, I remember Madrid in the 80s, and it had those narrow little kind of sidewalks and the cobblestone streets and so on. So Marseille is shown a little bit like that. Of course, New York is the New York of skyscrapers and so on. But actually, you do see like a lot of garbage, a lot of steam, a lot of...
I mean, I would say actually, I don't think it is the New York of skyscrapers. It's so ground level. You know, you're under things all the time. You don't see a kind of expanse.
The skyscrapers are always in the horizon, though I know what you mean, actually, because the film also made me think, my God, you know, those brownstone houses, you know, those little diners, I bet you they no longer exist and they've been replaced by some, you know, major housing development or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, this was New York at its most run down, yeah, kind of the 70s was where New York was at its financial worst. But you do see that, though. You do see, like, the streets are garbage strewn. You do see the steam coming out, yeah, of... you do see... You're also not in fashionable downtown New York. You're in the outer edges, in the boroughs, or, you know, the poorer areas. So anyway, I think it's a New York film, for sure.
Oh yeah,
you know.
certainly.
And I love the look of it. I mean, I think the film looks beautiful. And one of the things that I wanted to find out, but I didn't get around to it, is I think there's a kind of a Kodak color celluloid, yeah, that brings out these brilliant yellows and these bright reds, and and there's something very interesting about the films of the period that kind of have that look where the yellows just pop, yeah, and this film has it. What does IMDb tell us?
I'm just looking at the IMDb. Yeah, color, laboratory, deluxe, Hollywood, negative format, Eastman 100T 5254.
Eastman color is what it is, I think. Yeah.
Right.
So the films of the period that have it have a particular, yeah, the yellows and the blues and the reds, pop. And actually, it's very interesting because this is really a film noir, right? So it's all like blues, browns, blacks, right?
Yeah.
So actually, those moments where there's a yellow or a blue or a red really stand out. Yeah, they really pop out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I would go in thinking about the New York setting is, and this goes back to the difference between how it plays 50 years ago now to now, is I was thinking about Uncut Gems, the Safdie brothers film we saw last year.
Ah, yes.
Because that's set in New York, and that's kind of, I suppose you could say that's pretty ground level in the way that this is, you know, and it's about kind of underground things. And the level of tension that's kept up in Uncut Gems is, you maybe have never felt anything quite like that before. It's so high, and I know you sort of said, oh God, I couldn't really cope with it. I loved it. Is that how the French Connection would have felt in 1971? Like, is it just that we've kind of changed, and what was tense then feels less so now?
The thing is that a lot of things about the film still made me feel that way. So, for example, when Roy Scheider goes to Gene Hackman's apartment, I thought, my God, that looks like a bunker. Is that really how people lived? Yeah, are those like the way that real apartments in New York look like, right? Because you're not used to seeing them that way. You're used to seeing, Woody Allen, yeah, rich people apartments, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and certainly like the cars drew my attention. I remember those from my childhood, right? And the way that people dressed, and I remember seeing the nightclub sequences, thinking, of course, it makes sense that people still wore beehives, when they went out to posh places, because, normal people are always 3 or 4 years out of style, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, because I associate beehives with mid-60s or, 67 or something. Right, but here
it takes a while for the fashion to filter down the class structure.
Yes, so I thought the film was kind of it made me think in those registers, even though obviously it's a very contrived film. Yeah, it's very stylized and so on. Right, but it did make me it did make my mind operate in those registers, which most movies don't call upon. I mean, watching most films, you don't think, oh, like, is this how kitchens look, in Paris today? You don't think that.
Yeah.
I really love the look of the film. I think, I mean, one of the things about Friedkin, which hopefully will come up in the rest of his films, but, just from having seen Boys in the Band and Cruising, is how he is drawn to darkness. So Boys in the Band has a lot of wit, but actually it's a really depressing, dismal film. Cruising, again, the look it is a noir. It's like it's shot in color, but you could almost feel the black and whiteness of it, really, and kind of very similar uses of lighting to this film. Yeah, and again, this is a film about kind of an underworld, really. It's about cops operating to bust what they think is going to be not a drug ring, the import of the most dangerous drug of the period, into New York that had been relatively free of it until the film begins, right? So that's what they're trying to stop. So the world that you see is that world of low-level police investigations, with a shortage of money, the places that those people live, bars, lots of bars, right? Because one of the things about Popeye Doyle is that he's meant to be a bit of an alkie and a bit of a lost person, and he's got no girlfriend, and and also he's not that young, So yet you are meant to think of somebody who's a bit lost in life,
Yeah.
But I still go back to that question of Pauline Kael's, that this is what we feared films would become, i.e., that it is only about that look, and the sensation. It's like, a good-looking chase film, or is it more? This is becoming symptomatic of a lot of Friedkin's films, I think.
Right.
And it has, because, if you look at Melville's films, which I'm glad you brought them up, because in many ways they have similarities, but you get a sense of an ache in those films, of a loneliness that's oppressive, and of moral ambiguities and complexities that the characters themselves are aware of, and that they question existence and the point of life, and they're bewildered by it. You never get any of that with the Gene Hackman character, or I don't.
No, not at all. And like it's as though like he's someone who could ask those questions.
The thing about Friedkin is he doesn't show you those moments in between. So when you see Doyle, you always see Doyle acting. Yeah, you never see like Doyle, like the Alain Delon character in The Samurai, just smoking in his flat, right? Like, what does this person do in between his job? It's like,
well, that's kind of the impression you get, isn't it? Like that there is nothing else. It is just the job, and it's portrayed almost as there's a kind of obsession element to it. And when you get to the stripping down the car at the end, he's the one who's saying, "No, it's in here. It's definitely in here," and keeping them there long. Like everyone else wants to go home, basically saying, "No, it's not in here." He's the one who pushes them, and eventually they figure out where it is. And that's kind of what it's all about. And so there is definitely a kind of ambiguity in how I feel about his character, in that he is a horrible, racist, disgusting person. But ultimately he gets the result. He's the guy, again, like I say, with the hunch that pays off. Which is there's something kind of uncomfortable about. Are you supposed to question his racism, or is it something that like he's racist because it gets the job done, and actually you need to be, and actually he might be racist, but then all the black people do have drugs on them, so he was right,
And then that points to Friedkin's and the screenwriter's racism. The very idea that that could be, that all black people are drug dealers and on drugs, is really quite astonishing. So, unlike you, I wasn't bored. I think it's a really good film. It's beautiful to look at. It moves incredibly well. It's like a well-oiled machine. He's clearly got a fantastic visual sense. There were moments in the film that I thought were beautifully handled, that create tension, just through camera movement and cutting. So it's almost like it gives you a first person point of view on being startled or being surprised. And it's done through camera movement. It's really, really good. So he's obviously like a person with great technique, but I do think it doesn't add up too much, or it doesn't add up to enough for me.
Well, if we think about the aesthetic, because I said I was bored for a while, and I was bored for basically a majority of the first sort of 2/3 of the film, and once it starts getting more actiony, I liked it more, and I think the action kind of set pieces are put together really brilliantly. I think especially the car chase is great, I think, but Gene Hackman stalking Fernando Rey on and off the train is brilliant, and it's witty, and it's well timed, and it's well shot. Like he steps off in the background, so he steps off in the foreground, then he steps back off in the background, and he's gone. It's great, and that's a brilliant. And the whole time, like, of course he's made him. Of course, this guy who's walking around pretending to be on the phone, pretending to get a grape juice. Of course, Fernando Rey sat in the background knows who he is the whole time, and he's just waiting for his moment. It's perfect. And there were times when I thought, I thought actually one of the reasons that I found myself bored with this is because this has become such a style that I'm already used to before having even seen the film, because it is so iconic and because this was where these looks were kind of being established. And I was thinking about a short film that I made. You may have seen it, the running one where Matt's running through Birmingham.
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh right, I'll show it to you. And it's only like 3 or 4 minutes, and it's set to a piece of music, and it's just Matt running through Birmingham. And I filmed it, and it was mostly me editing it. I think Matt might take offence to that. But we were kind of shooting like on the fly, basically. Like, you run here, then I'll follow you, and so on and so forth. And I never thought I was inventing kind of a visual style when I was making it or anything like that. We were just trying to make something fun, and I was trying to pick shots that were cool and kind of linked together well. And then I watched this, and I go, just with the way that Gene Hackman is filmed crossing the street and walking between traffic, you get this sense of the space that he's in. You understand where he is and where everything else is around him. We've talked about kind of geographical sense of place in films an awful lot. You definitely get that in the chases and in the set pieces, this sense of knowing exactly where people are in relation to each other, which helps sort it out. And because that's something that I was trying to do when I was making this short thing. And so, and I watched it going, there were so many shots in The French Connection that I kind of recognise having stolen, basically, in that thing, without realising it. And it's not because I was consciously stealing from anything, but it's because actually this is where this style is made iconic and has filtered into everything. So even though I've not seen The French Connection from beginning to end before, the style is there inside my head. I know it, before I've even seen it. That's interesting.
There were two things that really caught my eye as characteristic of the period, one was the handheld camera, kind of, which must be a very early use of it to make it such a component of the film style. Yeah, there's lots of handheld camera, and there's lots of zoom.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Which is so characteristic of the period. So that surprised me, because also, I mean, the handheld camera, I'm not sure if it's actually somebody holding a camera in their hands, but it wobbles a lot, it jerks a lot. You get the feeling that there's someone there with the camera. And obviously it's before the development or the invention of the Steadicam. So the filming on the streets like that, and that's why you also get those interesting shots of the camera on the roof of the car, on
the bumper.
So the film is a very early and characteristic example of techniques that would become completely standardized in a little while.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about the kind of period and about the sort of style, I suppose, to say whether it's the originator, but it certainly seems to be where this has become kind of entrenched and iconic, and this is where you know it from.
Maybe, yeah.
Do you think, I suppose this is my last thing, do you think it looks like a cheap film?
No, I don't. I think it looks like a glossy, expensive film. Glossy might be the wrong word, because it's not a glossy film. It's shot on location and so on. But every shot looks like it's fully realized. Right? And the images have a texture and a depth. They've been thought through. They've been lit carefully and beautifully. I think, the zooms have been calculated. Even, the handheld camera has been calculated. You get the feeling that this is a film that's made with means to achieve something that actually was achieved. So that's not my problem with the film at all. My problem is the conceptualization, i.e., so I think Friedkin achieved what he wanted. It's a brilliantly realized film, but for me, it's a kind of insufficient. It's a low aspiration type of cinema in a way. It's a film that is surfaces, that you try to think beyond what it is about, and you get nowhere. It's kind of, it is about that chase, and it is about that kind of cop, and actually it's conveying views that are a bit dodgy. It doesn't have a great conceptualization of human beings or society, and it's not trying to tell you very much about that, So I think it's a film of limited aspirations, in which you feel the filmmakers don't themselves see those limitations. Yeah.
Interesting. And yet it won Best Picture. So,
Yes.
why was that? Did people see more under the surface than you thought? Or was it speaking to something that was in the zeitgeist? Or, you said it was kind of a sociological phenomenon, the way it was received and seen.
Yes. But I think it's also very good.
Well, yeah, that's true. Good.
So, I mean, it's technically kind of brilliant, really. I mean, and some of the things that Friedkin achieves, I think, are phenomenal. I mean, you talked about the chase sequence, but I think almost all the other things that we talked about, the creation of suspense and tension, through formal means, I mean, that is all amazing. But, and I feel this way a little bit about Spielberg as well, yeah? That, there's this amazing technique without much, to say, or without much knowledge about, people and places, or indeed history, in spite of what he's made. And I just feel a little bit like that with this film, yeah, that, I mean, to me, the Popeye Doyle character isn't a character with depth, the police enforcement of it isn't complex enough, even, the Fernando Rey character, like, he's all elegant. He could be an aristocrat, yet he's also meant to be a dock worker who earned his fortune through illegal means. So where's the roughness or the killer instinct, or what you expect someone like that to? It's not there, right? So it's interesting because she's the one who got me to think about it, really, because I thought, I mean, I saw the film again yesterday and I thought, oh, this is so good. It's like, it looks smashing, and, I loved Hackman, and isn't he sexy? And, that use of color and the noir aspect, I thought all that was wonderful. And then kind of when I read that thing, this is what we feared films would become. Yeah, this is what when we were young we feared films might become. And I think it's true. Yeah, it is all about car crashes and mechanical excitements, the creation of mechanical excitements, and surface pleasures, So now, obviously, I'm using this, surface depth model to apply to this film, but kind of. Yes, but I would, because actually some of the films that are seen to be superficial, like musicals, I think they have enormous depth in their surfaces. Yes, they're about the way life should be, and so on. Whereas actually, in this film, I'm trying to seek kind of meaning, and I'm not finding it.
Are you sure it's not just the case that the film actually espouses a lack of meaning that you disagree with, that you find you can't sympathise with? The film says life is meaningless.
You see, maybe, but I think this is a film that's based on real people. The film goes out of its way to tell you that they're real people, that this really happened. Yeah, so I think the film has a seriousness of purpose that it's not living up to. It's telling you these things. Yeah, it's a real story with real people. Yes, and actually it has that coda about, the injustice of the system, that these crooks, barely get a suspended sentence or whatever. So I think it, in its own mind, in the filmmaker's mind, this is not just about car chases.
Yeah. But actually, I mean, when you think about it, that coda does feel superficial too, I think.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? They got away with it. Oh, the justice system is corrupt. Oh, boo-hoo. But we've been reveling in a corrupt cop the whole time.
Yes. And let me add something, because again, just to make that analogy with the musicals, and the musicals being about surfaces. But these musicals about surfaces, or actually sometimes comedies about surfaces, affect you really deeply. Yeah, you feel great emotion, or they're very moving, or and actually I didn't feel like this at all with this film. I mean, it was really superficial excitements.
Yeah.
With me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, but I'm really glad I've seen it. It's God, I mean, how is it 50 years old? Where's the time go, Jose?
So, I hope you stay with us because we've got a whole series of Friedkin films lined up, and I hope you stay with us for those podcasts. I hope. I think I'm also kind of giving the wrong impression because I really enjoyed, The French Connection. So, it's just not my idea of a great film. So we may find this to be the case subsequently as well. Who knows? Stick around.
Well, it might be like me with the Five Bloods the other day, going, I had a really good time with this, and then you read one review that went, no, actually, it's not all that, and you went, oh no, it's not.
Well, I think it's important to have high standards.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, jolly good.
All right, so thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.